Live. It is your show, and you can take control of the airwaves toll-free at 800-259-9231, the SACL CAI toll-free line. That's 800-259-9231. It's Ian here with you.
And Wayne.
And Mark.
And you, as always, can join us online at freetalklive.com. All the features on our website are completely free, so do enjoy those on us. That, again, freetalklive.com. Going to start things out tonight with a guest. As you know, we don't do them very often on the show, but from time to time we find outstanding personalities and interesting people that deserve to be shared with you. And this is someone who we've read his writings on the air before, but this is actually the first time that we've actually had him on the air with us. So I guess it's about time. And many of our listeners have been clamoring for it. So consumer demand has won out yet again. And welcome, Stefan Molyneux, to Free Talk Live.
Well, thanks very much. It's great to be on, great to chat with you guys finally, and just wanted to let you know that most of these sort of quote listeners clamoring for me to be on the show, mostly me with different email accounts, different accents, calling up Hungarian women, you know, that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to be upfront with that. So
Stefan, you do accents? Stefan, you do accents?
You know, I was an actor when I was younger. I spent 2 years studying at the National
Let me hear your cowboy.
Canada, so. Sorry?
Let me hear your cowboy.
Oh, Lord. Let's start off with something like that.
Yeah, great.
Okay, well, which state do you want? Because, you know, the Cowboys are different to each state.
You can pick.
He's stalling.
Don't listen to him.
Do you think? Is it that obvious? Yeah.
What a great way to start a nice intellectual conversation, Mark. Thanks for that.
Well, he said accents. I'm sorry. Intellectual isn't my strong suit, you know.
Well, the reason, I guess a lot of our listeners, we've got a bit of a crossover here because Stefan, if you don't know, is also a bit of a talk show host. So I guess you don't really host a talk show. I don't know if that's really even accurate to call your show that. Is it?
I do a show on Sundays, which is like a conference call on Skype. But no, it's not like a radio talk show. It's mostly me. And then like once a week I'll sort of have people come in and we'll go back and forth.
You do have a talk product. It is not talk radio per se. It is Stefan, and the product is Freedomain Radio, which you can actually access at freedomainradio.com. And of course, there's more than you've got the message board, like we have a message board, and actually you actually do video podcasting in addition to audio podcasting as well. Do you find that one is more popular than the other?
Well, it's interesting. I do find that the video stuff, you're reaching a younger crowd, and you've really got to keep it snappy, and you've got to keep it relatively short because, these kids hopped up on caffeine with ADD, MTV generation. You know, the sustainability of the conversation is a little bit more intense, is the nicest way I can put it. I get a bit of an older crowd with the podcast, so we can get into more relaxed and deep topics that way, but... definitely the video crowd is like, hey, nothing's been happening for 12 minutes. The camera hasn't changed. What's going on, right? So that's a little bit tougher for people, but it's definitely a good venue for getting people to the podcast.
Now, how would you describe Freedomain Radio?
Well, Freedomain Radio is, I sort of started 25 years ago as an objectivist and went through a libertarian phase. And so it's a show about personal and political freedom. I was very much onto the political and economic side of things, and then my wife screwed it all up. My wife's a psychologist, and so what she did was she began to sort of talk to me about the origins of people's particular belief structures as adults, and sort of step me through the process of how, we sort of born into a structure of the family which gives us certain tastes or flavors of authority and how we relate to people. There's churches, there's teachers, and so she helped sort of really open up this world of childhood and its sort of impact on our belief systems. So I sort of began to work a little bit more around how is it that we can achieve the maximum freedom within our own lives, given that we don't really have a whole lot of control over getting rid of the state. Much though we'd like to. Yeah. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. So how much can we bring freedom into our own lives? And that, I think, has a lot more to do with our personal relationships than it does with our relationships to the state, which is kind of abstract and one-sided. So
have you,
I really try and focus on that.
Have you ever read Harry Brown's How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World?
It has been recommended to me, but I haven't. I did listen to the dear departed Harry Brown for quite some time, and he would make reference to aspects of that book.
Yeah.
But I think it's something quite similar in it.
Right. It sounds as though you're sort of continuing in that tradition, and I think that's great. I think that's something that could be very helpful to a lot of people. Tips on to how to live free, not just in reality, but also in your mind, and I think that's very important stuff. So your show is more of a philosophical exercise in freedom, whereas we sort of cover more of the issues elements of the whole thing here, and so I think we can coexist fairly well together, and we share a lot of listeners, and I think that's a happy little symbiosis that we have here, Stefan. But so one of the other reasons I have you on the show is because I happen to think that you're probably one of the greatest thinkers of our current age. I really enjoy it whenever I spot one of your articles on, for instance, LouRockwell.com. One of our favorites, I think, that we've read in at least the recent past was The Gun in the Room.
Oh, yeah.
How did you who showed you The Gun in the Room? How did you come to be aware of that?
I mean, and I guess your listeners know the idea. And the idea, I just had a debate with a listener today about this very issue that he was arguing. And it really came out of just debating with somebody about the Iraq War. Actually, it was somebody that my wife knew brought her husband over who was quite militaristic. So we were debating about the Iraq War. And it just kind of came down to this central issue that I found to be very powerful in terms of communicating about liberty. Because, we all get kind of stuck in statistics and this and that and the history and the details and so on. And I wanted to try and find a way to cut through to the marrow of the discussion and try and find a way to communicate in a, I have a great respect for religious forms of communication. I mean, that's really powerful stuff. So I wanted to try and get to a core message. And in that debate, I could not get him to agree that the Iraq War was bad. And, we were all arguing about what the effects would be, whether it would be good or bad. This is some years ago. And so finally what I said was, well, you and I disagree. Now, and it just sort of struck me really that the fundamental issue was that I was allowing him to disagree with me, right? So I wasn't going to throw him in jail or support him getting thrown in jail if he wanted to support the Iraq War. Like,
certainly not. That would be barbaric and awful.
Right. And so I said, can we get a mutual agreement on that? Can we get a mutual understanding? I won't prevent you from supporting the Iraq War. I would never throw you in jail for supporting it. Will you support me not being in favor of that war? And he said, well, sure, of course.
Will he not throw you in a jail cell?
Yeah, right. Would he support, would he give me the liberty to disagree with him without me being thrown in jail? And he said, well, sure. And I said, so then you'd support me not paying taxes to support the war. And there was one of these horrible silences. You had those three. You're at a kind of social engagement and things are going fine, and I'm practicing my southern accents with the cowboys and so on. and then suddenly you get to a really core issue, and it's like the air just gets all electric and the hairs go up in your arm. Yeah. Just because it really came down to that issue. Would you support me not paying taxes to pay for this war?
Did he answer after you sort of dropped that bomb?
He grudgingly did, because you can't get out of that corner, right? Unless you're willing to say, yes, I will throw you in jail. In which case, then you just say, well, there's no point having a discussion, because if you're going to throw me in jail, let's not pretend that we're debating.
Yeah, right. What is there to debate on if you're going to throw me in jail if I disagree?
Right. And I think that one of the things that libertarians do is we engage in this process of debate, and we're kind of, we're like the traumatized kids with the alcoholic dad, like there's this big elephant in the room called the state and the gun, and am I going to get thrown in jail? And I think we don't as often as we should just ask that basic question. Like, if I disagree with you, are you going to have me thrown in jail? Because if you are, then let's not pretend to debate. I mean, it's totally barbaric, as you say.
Now, you had given me this example off the air. We were talking on your message board, and I think it's a great approach. I think it's very friendly. It's not as combative necessarily as saying, "So you want to put me in a jail cell," which is sometimes the approach that I've taken, and I kind of like that because you're appealing to their kindness. Right up front, and you back them into that corner to which they can't get away from.
Speaking of being up front, I'm probably going to use your little that little line on callers in the future.
Well, and you're right. I mean, the flavor, like the emotional flavor, which we bring to bear in the conversation, it definitely can be like, oh, you want me thrown into the gulag and blah blah blah. Yeah. But it's like I will extend this courtesy to you that we can disagree and you can live free. I would hope that you would extend that courtesy to me. And
it would only be fair. Stefan, hang on. We're bringing you back for more. If you've got a question for Stefan Molyneux, he is a great thinker, great market anarchist thinker or free marketeer. We'll find out what he calls himself here in a few moments. 800-259-9231. That is the SACL CAI toll-free line, 1-800-259-9231. This is your show. It is Free Talk Live. Talk Live. It is your show, and you can take control of the airwaves toll-free at 800-259-9231. That's 1-800-259-9231. You can take control of the airwaves, bring up whatever you want, though we are in the midst of a guest at the moment here, and we're going to get back to that here shortly. And by the way, you can join us online at freetalklive.com. Lots of features on our website. All of them are for free, and that includes live streams. There's a broadband version of the show and a dial-up version as well, both waiting for you for free at freetalklive.com. And SACL CAI has a full-orbed approach to account recovery. It's really three companies in one. They do collections, early out billing, and they purchase charged-off receivables. SACL knows the way they treat your customer reflects on you. Their staff is respectful. They record every call, and they have the best equipment money can buy, so your business is handled as efficiently as possible. See their banner at freetalklive.com or call 800-544-6359. That's 1-800-544-6359. Do business with businesses that support Free Talk Live. As we return to Stefan Molyneux. He is a philosopher, he's an author, and the host of Freedomain Radio, which you can get online at freedomainradio.com. Stefan, you're back on Free Talk Live.
Thank you very much.
So we've been covering just a variety of different things, and I have a number of questions that I would like to ask you, but I also got two co-hosts in the studio here, so I want to give you guys the opportunity to ask Stefan some questions here. Of course, we'll take calls if you've got them at 800-259-9231.
Stefan, what kind of reaction do you get from your podcast? I know you do an audio podcast on your way to and from work. Is that correct? You've got a long drive and you just record it in the car. Do you get distracted when you do this podcast? I'm just wondering, what's it like? What kind of response do you get? How many people listen? That kind of thing.
Well, I think it's sort of hard to track the internet stuff. I had 210,000 media views last month. And I think it's tracking around 25,000 listeners, so
sounds good.
It's not too bad.
Yeah,
I think
it's not too bad at all.
Tuning in. It's not bad. I think a lot of people are tuning in just to find out what's going to happen if I ever get pulled over.
I don't
because it's a video podcast in the car as well. Like I have my webcam on there.
Yes.
And so people think that's dangerous. But of course, I've got the recording, so nothing bad's going to happen, right? So,
I've seen that before. What possessed you to start doing that with video in your car?
Well, I wanted to reach the people who are on YouTube, right? I mean, there's lots of people who don't really go to podcasts because they're sort of sitting after school or whatever. So I just sort of wanted to get to that. I actually, just sort of a minor correction, which there's no reason you'd know anything about that, I quit. Like I gave up my career. Right?
Okay.
So I'm now a kept man. My mistress is my wife and the muse philosophy. So I've actually quit. Like I was a software executive for many years, kind of founded companies, grew companies, sold companies, and now I'm sitting there grubbing away on a microphone and couldn't be happier. So I've actually quit and gone full-time because I'm sort of like you guys in a lot of ways. You have a lot of donations, and that's sort of the way that I operate too. So
you're making
the reaction's been
you're getting enough
positive.
money to be able to do this full-time, quote-unquote, professionally, that kind of thing?
Well, I mean,
some money
professionally. I think you guys have it more down than I do, but I think that it's definitely a pay cut. I mean, it's software. It's like a fire hose of money, right?
Are you feeding yourself with the with the donations?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually.
Wow! Congratulations. We're not there yet.
You're covering. Speak for yourself.
Oh, that's right. You are getting 90%.
Well, and remember, I don't. What are my expenses, right? I mean,
right.
my
low
studio
overhead.
is my car.
Well, now that you're home, do you still drive in your car to do the podcast?
No, I picked up a little portable recording device that lets me record from a microphone into MP3 format. I actually go for walks and hikes and podcast there and scare the livestock with my ranting.
Huh.
Now, all right, so how would you define yourself? I sort of labeled you as perhaps a market anarchist or free marketeer. I think some alternative terms would be anarcho-capitalist or voluntarist. Do you have a favorite, or do you try to stay away from labels?
Well, I think labels are inevitable, but they're always very tricky because labels limit, in a sense, as much as they reveal. So when you say anarcho-capitalist, people just think that, I don't know, like you want to sell motorbikes with machine guns to people who don't respect the law or something. Like, I just don't know what that means.
You mean we don't?
Yeah. Well, no, that's the second hour, right? But, so,
we have a new sponsor I'd like to announce.
Harley machine gun. But no, I like the term philosopher just because it sounds fairly elevated, and it really is around the search for truth, right? I mean, market capitalism or market anarchy or anarchism, whatever you want to call it, that's the result of the methodology of rationalism and empiricism. And so you don't want to identify yourself with a result. Like Einstein didn't say, I am a relativist. He said, I am a scientist, right? And the theory of relativity was one of the conclusions that came out of that methodology. So I love the methodology of philosophy. One of the conclusions is, voluntarism, market anarchism, the free market, and so on. So I don't like to sort of identify myself with a conclusion, but rather with a methodology, because it's much more flexible and powerful, I think.
That makes sense. I'm happy to call you a philosopher, but if you had to pick a label, which of those four would you prefer?
I'd stick with philosopher, I think.
Very good.
Because that way I can snare people in my webs of logic before they find out where I'm leading them.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And something else I wanted to cover about your show and what you're doing as far as creating audio and video content on the Internet. Do you feel like, you'd mentioned to me that it took you, I think, something like 20 years to get to the point where you're at today as far as philosophically, just the progression of rejecting the state and, just that whole progression. Took you some time to get there. It's taken me at least 7 years to get to where I am today, and arguably you know a heck of a lot more about philosophy than I do. I'm just a government school graduate. So do you feel like shows like ours and yours are helping fast-track people? I sort of feel that way. I feel like we're helping people jump over a lot of the hurdles that we might have struggled with in the past and really helping take them directly to the conclusions that we've ended up making. Do you get that impression from your show, the people that listen?
Well, I think so. Certainly I think so, and I think that an appropriate analogy, if it works for you, is something like, I like to think that what we're doing is sort of like medicine, right? So the first guy to figure out that maybe penicillin might be helpful in fighting infections or whatever, fighting bacteria, he had to jump through all these hoops. He had to test on all of these, test on rats and all this kind of stuff, and eventually after 10 years he tested on people and so on. And so what we're doing is, when we have to sort of carve our own way into figuring out what's right and wrong, what's true and false, we then sort of prove it. And the way that we prove it, in my view, is in our own lives first, right? That's sort of why I focus on the personal freedom first. Mm-hmm. When you've got personal freedom in your own life, you become much more irresistible, I think, in terms of communicating about freedom in a political or economic sense. So I think that ethics and knowledge and truth is a kind of technology, right? And if you're a doctor in the 19th century and you don't prescribe antibiotics, you're not a bad doctor because they're not invented yet. But now, if you don't do it, you are a bad doctor because it's common knowledge. So I think that we're sort of the icebreakers, and then people can paddle upstream a little bit with the sort of ice broken along the way. And I think it does get easier every time we communicate something in a sort of impassioned or positive or clear way. It just makes it that much easier. People don't have to invent the wheel as much themselves, so I think it is essential.
Right. I think we're sort of on we're on the very beginning cusp of a bit of a libertarian, liberty-oriented revolution in at least the Western world, because of the Internet. We're able to. We've got people who have the right message, like your show and our show, and we're able to now propagate it out so much more effectively than we ever could have in the past. The things that we're doing and what you're doing wouldn't have been possible a decade ago. And I think that we're really starting to see some of the results of that, and I think it's very powerful. And Stefan, if you'll hold on, we're going to bring you back for some more. 800-259-9231 is the SACL CAI toll-free line. If you've got a question for philosopher Stefan Molyneux, I think he's one of the more talented thinkers of our time, you can get on the lines and ask it, because he's here. 1-800-259-9231. Coming up, I want to talk to him about getting from here to there. We'll see what that's all about. Coming up, it's Free Talk Live. With your help, we can spread the message of liberty around the world. Consider becoming a Free Talk Live amplifier for just $3 a month now at amp.freetalklive.com. If you can't afford it, keep enjoying us for free. If you can spare the $3, visit amp.freetalklive.com. This is Free Talk Live, the toll-free number for you to take control of the airwaves, 800-259-9231. You can bring up what you want, though. Hopefully you'd have a question for Stefan Molyneux, our guest right now. That is the SACL CAI toll-free line, 1-800-259-9231. My name is Ian.
Wayne.
And Mark.
And you can join us online, of course, at freetalklive.com. All the features there are completely free. Updates included. You get signed up. We clue you in whenever there's something fresh to announce about the show. You'll know first if you're on the updates list at updates.freetalklive.com. That's updates.freetalklive.com. Are you prepared for the day the dollar drops to zero? D2Z.org proposes that day is near. Go to D2Z.org and learn how to survive and thrive during the U.S. dollar crisis. That's D2Z.org. We're back with Stefan Molyneux, and you're back on Free Talk Live. Stefan, are you there?
You bet.
Very good. So we've covered, again, a variety of different topics. I wanted to move into the future and talk about how we can get from here to there, specifically from where we are today, the status quo, to a state with, no government, a state without a state, if you will. And I think that you share that vision. In fact, that's one of the things that I really like about a lot of the articles that you write, especially a lot of them I see at LouRockwell.com. I don't know where else they appear. But a lot of them, you've got a great vision for some possibly market-oriented solutions to typical objections that people come up with. One of those is your classic DRO example, the Defense Resolution, I think it was, organizations?
Dispute Resolution Organizations.
Excuse me, Dispute Resolution Organizations, this sort of market defense sort of group that would allegedly spring up in the absence of the government defenders, so-called. And I think that's great. I think we need people with vision for the future and just some ideas as to what the marketplace would come up with. Now, a DRO wouldn't necessarily be what the market came up with, but it's one idea, and I think that's really important. It's important to have those ideas to share with people so they know that this isn't just some total pie-in-the-sky fantasy. And you're very good at coming up with those. So in that same vein, what do you think the most likely path is going to be to get from here to there?
Well, I mean, that's an excellent question, and it is a core question. Just before I answer that, the first thing that I would say is I'm sort of very concerned about people becoming enslaved to liberty. So it's like I must work to bring about a stateless society or to fight the government and so on. And we're lucky enough to be able to make some meat and bread out of that. Not everyone is as lucky as that. So I think it's important to continue to focus on freedom and liberty in your personal life and so on.
Absolutely. And I want to point out that I completely agree. If you don't have your personal freedom first, you shouldn't be out there putting your freedom on the line to fight for others. I totally agree with you. And I've found my personal freedom, so at this point, I'm fighting for everyone else's freedom.
Right. You know that thing, you're on the plane and they say, if the oxygen mask drops down, you suck the air yourself before helping the person next to you.
Exactly.
That's sort of the way that I see freedom. But the way I think it's going to come about, I have sort of the long view and the short view, and I'll just very briefly talk about those, starting with the short view. And the short view is that, as you know, the sort of international financial system based on the U.S. dollar is going through some rather exciting tumult. The U.S. Unfunded liabilities are $40 to $60 trillion. Nobody even knows. They stopped publishing the money supply, and I mean, it's clearly not far from the end as far as this existing system goes. Mm-hmm. Now, people who don't listen to their doctor's advice to exercise and stop smoking and eat better or whatever, and they say, "No, I'm fine," right, and wheezing when they go up the stairs. If the doctor says, if you don't fix up yourself, you're going to have a heart attack, right? And the guy's like, "Nah, doc, I'll be fine. I'll live forever." This kind of thing. My dad was, 90, smoked cigars and stuff. Now, if the doctor keeps saying, "Look, if you keep this up, you're going to crash," when the guy does have a heart attack, that's when he may start listening to that's the chance he has to start listening to the doctor.
Right.
I mean, he may still not, but, if he's not going to listen to the doctor before the crash, he might afterwards. So I feel a certain amount of urgency. I'm not sure if you guys feel the same way, to get the message out that, violence doesn't work, right? Coercion doesn't work. It leads to unsustainable situations. Governments always grow until they destroy the host society, or attempt to, and certainly until they self-destruct. So I think that we need to be the people saying, even though sometimes people look at us like we're crazy, this isn't sustainable, this isn't going to work, there is going to be a crash. This system is heading for disaster.
Right.
And that way, when it does, at least we have some credibility, right? Because there will be
finally, for the first time.
Yeah, right. It'll be shocking. I won't even know what to do with it. Credibility will come to my door, and I'll say, "I'm sorry, you must be looking for somebody else on this."
They'll just blame you for it happening.
Right. But so I think we need to really get the word out there that violence doesn't work. Because when the system crashes, right, historically when systems crash, you sort of look at Germany in the 1920s, other sorts of situations, when a system crashes, sort of people go one of two ways, right? The two ways. They either say, well, the system doesn't work because it's immoral and it's based on violence, and so what has failed is not freedom but coercion, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we want people to get out of the coming crash, that what failed was not freedom but what failed was coercion.
Yes.
And that way the solution will not be more of the same, right? So, but of course it could go the other way, right? Where people say, well, freedom was given its chance, the free market was given its chance, the same way that they thought in the Depression, right? They thought that the Great Depression in the 1930s was the result of the free market. Of course, it wasn't true at all. And so the solution was more government. If we can get people to really understand that the violence, the gun in the room, the coercion at the root of the government is what's causing all these problems, then when those problems come to a head, I think that people will say, well, so the solution has to be less. So I think there's going to be that short-term view. And the longer-term view is, better parenting. We've got to get our kids out of public schools so that they don't grow up with this really distorted view of authority and society and so on. So
let me see if I understood you there correctly. You're saying that, keep up the message of education, getting people into the pro-liberty fold, and, helping them understand the gun in the room and that government is force and that force creates unintended consequences and all other sorts of problems. And then just sort of wait for the point at which government fails. Is that what you're suggesting? Is there nothing we can do to hasten its failure or to end it in advance of its natural destruction?
Well, sure, there are things that we can do, but they're kind of unpalatable, right? Like, so for instance, if you get yourself arrested and get a nice, long, juicy jail sentence, then you're no longer contributing taxes, but you're draining the coffers, right? I mean, if you go and sign up for the war in Iraq, you're, then allowing them to bleed more taxpayers' money in the form of, taxes to pay for the war. There's lots of things that you can do to hasten the government's demise along, or if you want, you can pay lots of extra taxes so they can use the money as leverage in the international markets to get further into debt. But I don't think that any individual action that we can take is going to have much effect that way. I also think it's far too late for a sort of controlled demolition, so to speak, or a soft landing for the system.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I mean, what is the debt? It's like $120,000 per American.
It's obscene. Yeah, it's very large.
And there's no motivation. It seems to me if the government's going to collapse, it's going to likely collapse due to its fiat currency. And there's no motivation by the people that control the fiat currency to have a soft landing. The soft landing would help the consumer end person. They might as well make as much money as they possibly can on up to the day that it detonates.
Yeah, their mortgages are paid off.
Well, there's also somebody who's a friend of mine who is he's a Russian, and he left Russia shortly after the crash. And he said, sort of looking through the Russian, he's very interested in history. And he said, like, they knew in Russia in the 80s that the system was completely unsustainable. And so what happened was, it's sort of like a whole bunch of people in a treasure room and the doors closing forever. So they grab everything that they can conceivably get a hold of, because they know, like, the people on the inside know where we are in terms of, like, a lot better than you or I ever will, right? Until after the fact.
And they all have their Swiss bank accounts in other currencies.
Right, and they have a much closer view of how close we are to hitting the ground, right? So what happens is, when people realize that it's unsustainable, like that it's going to collapse within their own generation, what happens is it starts to accelerate it much faster, right? Because then everyone's like, oh, my God, it's going to go down. Well,
run the banks
here. You grab, run. Like, you just stuff everything you can. And I think that's what the war in Iraq has something to do with that. There's no better way for the government to pillage the taxpayers than to declare a war, right? So you look at the prescription drug plan, like all of the spending that goes on, and people are all surprised the Republicans are spending so much, but because it can't last, there's a feeding frenzy going on right now, which is just going to accelerate it even before, the original projections were whatever's going on internal to the Fed or whoever knows better.
Now, we're going to do our best, obviously, in the meantime, between now and then, to educate as many people about liberty as possible. I don't know how much of a dent we're going to make, because who knows how long this is going to take for it to actually come crashing down. But when it does, the federal government will fail, but the state governments might still be there, and most people will still believe in government. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to bring an end to all states, perhaps just the overarching federal one. I want to continue with more of this discussion with Stefan Molyneux and your calls about what you want. This is Free Talk Live. This is Free Talk Live, and you can take control of the airwaves toll-free at 800-259-9231. That's the SACL CAI toll-free line for you. It's Ian here with you.
And Wayne.
And Mark.
1-800-259-9231. Join us online, freetalklive.com. All the features there are completely free, so enjoy those on us. And if you like the show, you want to help support Free Talk Live, then head on over and amp us. Head over to amp.freetalklive.com and send us as little as $3 a month. That's all we're asking for. If you like the show and you want to help get us on more radio stations, because that's one of the things that the AMP money is going for. It's going to promote us to other stations to get on more, and we've got some real cool things working behind the scenes right now. I don't think we can really talk about them, but we've got a major possible major station announcement coming soon. We've got our fingers crossed for it, and it's happening only because of you guys that are amping the show. We got hundreds of our listeners that are sending us as little as $3 a month, and it makes a big difference. You also get access to special perks like the AMP-only call-in line, the AMP-only forum, and chat room and more. All the details at amp.freetalklive.com. But only a few more moments to interview Stefan Molyneux. He is back on the line with us. Actually, Stefan, you're in Canada, right?
Yes, and sorry to be totally annoying. Can I just finish one thought that I was just thinking about during the break? Because we were I'm not used to interruptions.
Yes.
Because I just do a monologue. But I just sort of wanted to point out, like, it's a challenge for sure where it is that we're heading. But man, oh man, like if ever freedom and liberty have had a shot in the world, in world history, it's now.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, it's now. We have the most incredible tools. This is like the first time that Luther translated the Bible into the Vulgate. I mean, we have the most incredible tools to get information out to people, bypassing the powers that be, bypassing the people who aren't interested in our message, and speaking directly in a pure Socratic tradition, speaking directly to people. And that, to me, is the most thrilling aspect. I mean, that's why I threw out my career, because this is an absolutely pivotal prism historic moment where we get a chance to communicate about the truth directly to people, and I think that the truth will win out, and it sure as heck has never had a better venue.
You're absolutely right. Individuals have always been better at moving, more agile than the state. We've always been able to organize more effectively, and we're more decentralized. But now with the advent of the internet, it is so much. It has enabled us to do so much more with so much less, and so cheaply and affordably and effectively. I completely agree, and as that sort of ties into what I said before. And I think we're just on the beginning cusp of this wonderful time. It's only going to get better for people like us, Stefan.
Absolutely, and I think that, in a sense, nobody can give you a blueprint about how the world is going to become free, but, without a doubt, freedom is better than slavery. Pacifism, not self-defense. Pacifism is better than violence. Voluntarism is better than coercion, and, we've got an amazing group of people who are out there passionately advocating for this. For the first time in history, we can speak to, hundreds of thousands of people a month. I mean, how could that conceivably have been done? If you're a professor, maybe you can teach 1,000 people a year. We're reaching tens or hundreds of thousands of people every month. I mean, it's absolutely staggering. It's viral, I think, and because we're the healthiest virus out there, we're going to spread. I mean, that to me just seems inevitable.
Exactly. It's like a happy little virus. And by the way, I want to plug your website again. Definitely want to get this in here. It's freedomainradio.com. That's how people can get in touch with you and grab your podcast and your video podcast and all that other good stuff and get interactive on your forums. And by the way, I wanted to go, speaking of, how to get from here to there and things that we can do now today that weren't possible in the past, I want to hear what you think about the Free State Project. For those of you just tuning in, we're on with Stefan Molyneux. He's a philosopher, a very liberty-minded philosopher, and I like the way he thinks, but I've never really actually heard you explain how you feel about this movement of 20,000 liberty-loving individuals all moving into the same call it a state, landmass, in this case New Hampshire, in order to live more free. How does that make you feel?
Well, two of you have moved, right?
Two of us?
Isn't that right?
All of us in this room. There's three of us here. It's Ian, Wayne, and Mark, and all three of us have already moved. And there are a few hundred people that have also moved up here as early movers as part of the Free State Project. But the official move doesn't start until there's the 20,000 mark has been reached, at which we're I think over 7,000 members at this point. So we're still well on that path. But yes, we have moved.
Well, that's great. And you like New Hampshire?
Oh, it's beautiful.
Well, that's great. I don't think that you can use the state to control the state. I don't think that you. I mean, this is a huge debate that I've had recently. I've been like the Keanu Reeves in the second Matrix movie. Like 6 million people piling on him, and he's trying to do his thing, right? It's this huge debate relative to the Ron Paul candidacy and things that we can do to try to control the state, to control the growth of the state, to try and fight resolutions by getting involved in politics. I love the idea, and I spent many years. I actually tried to found a political party up here in Canada, then realized, of course, just what a mess that is to try and get anything achieved.
Right.
I love the idea of the political solution, but just looking at it sort of as sort of coldly and empirically as I can, objectivists, classical liberals, libertarians, anarchists, you name it, have tried to use political means for the last 150 years to control, restrain, minimize the growth of the power of the state. And it's been a complete disaster. I mean, not only have people not been able to shrink the state, but the state has been growing ever faster.
I'd like to interject something here, and that is that the Free State Project isn't necessarily a political movement. It is simply a movement of liberty-oriented individuals, some of which are minarchists, some of which are free marketeers, and variety in between. A movement of individuals who are all moving to the same place in order to be activists for liberty. Now, whether that means doing politics, I don't know. It depends on each individual and what he or she wants. So somebody like me, I'm a little bit more oriented towards civil disobedience. I happen to prefer that crowd, and there's a large crowd of agorists and civil disobedience types and anarchists here in Keene, New Hampshire, where I've chosen to move. Obviously, more of the political types have moved into the state house up in Concord, for instance. So I just want to make it clear, in case people have sort of misinterpreted the Free State Project to you, it is not a political movement. It's simply a movement of liberty-oriented people all converging together. Now, if you've got it based on that concept, just the idea of, okay, well, I agree with you that over the past several decades, the liberty movement's been an utter abject failure for the most part. But I think that one of the reasons why it's been such a failure is because we've been so spread apart. We've been so far away from those who are like-minded, and I think there's something really valuable to getting all those people together. And I'm kind of with you, Stefan. I don't know if anything's really going to come from all the political stuff. But at the same time, if that's what those guys want to go and do, far be it for me to stop them. Eventually, they'll come to the same conclusions that you and I have, and that is they're spinning their wheels and they're wasting their efforts. But I think that there's something else to be said, and I'd like to hear you just, your opinion on the convergence of libertarians and liberty-minded people all moving sort of together to the same area, just that general concept.
Right, and thanks for the correction. I thought it was more focused around trying to gain control of the legislature. But look, surrounding yourself with liberty-minded people is essential. Doing business with people who have the same basic approach to, values have a huge impact on one's social life, one's love life, your life as a parent, your life as a child to your parents. Values have an immense, enormous, fundamental impact on the quality of your relationship. So the more that you can surround yourself with people who have, you don't want to say the same values, because you can't photocopy anybody, but at least the same basic values, right? You don't see a whole lot of scientific conventions, including people who, read the movement of atoms from Ouija boards, right? You try to get people of like minds together so that you can not keep having to rehash over the basics all the time. So, I think it's a wonderful thing to surround yourself with as many people who have rational values as possible.
Also, how do you feel about using the government's cloak of legitimacy against it? We all know that there are these people out there that believe in government, and they have their elections, and they do their government thing, and the vast majority of the population still is operating under this belief system. So while the population still believes in the government because of its cloak of legitimacy, how do you feel about, and I don't think that you would actually get involved in this, but I was pretty burnt out on politics down in Florida, but I figured, you know what, I'll give it one last shot here in New Hampshire before I completely disassociate myself from it. And so what we're doing here, for instance, is we're running some candidates in the local municipal elections simply for the purpose. If they win, then that's good. We'll try to cut down the size of government. But there's a tension given to these political campaigns. You can talk about Ron Paul too, as well, in the same sort of vein. In that, is it possible that, or do you feel like it's at least effective to some extent to utilize the system for its promotional ability, because the news media pays so much attention to it, to run those candidates, to spread these ideas? Yes, you're still using the system, but otherwise, if you didn't use the system, then you wouldn't be they wouldn't be paying as much attention to you. There's a chance that people wouldn't come across your message. For instance, I wouldn't have come across libertarianism had it not been perhaps for Harry Brown running as the Libertarian presidential candidate in the year 2000, and look at all the things that I've been able to do since then. Do you see where I'm coming from?
I absolutely do, and as far as communication goes, I think that if you can get a consistent message of, against the pro non-aggression principle against the initiation of the use of force, if you can get that consistent message out, whatever you have to do, if you've got to hide in the hat of the Pope and wave a little flag, that seems to me a perfectly acceptable way to do it. The problem is, of course, that if you're running for office, you are implicitly legitimizing a system that, at its fundamentals, is completely evil. That's
why I'm not running for office. Myself, right, I can't bring myself to do it. I couldn't live with myself that way. We're out of time, Stefan, but I'm sure we'll have you back.
Well, thanks. I really, really appreciated the chance. It was great to finally chat with you guys.
Thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate it. Hour number 2 is on the way. This is Free Talk Live. You take control. DVD, books, music, instruments, periodicals, computers, software, electronic, photo, cell phone, office products, home and garden, bed and bath, furniture, kitchen, pet supply, automotive, hardware, apparel, shoes, jewelry, grocery, healthcare, sports and outdoors, toys, games, used, and more. It's a department store at your fingertips. Amazon.freetalklive.com. Get all your shopping done, a great deal, delivery to your door, and a percentage of your purchase will go to Free Talk Live when you enter Amazon through Amazon.freetalklive.com.